We had an extended school day, and I found myself sitting in the parking lot in full-blown panic attack. In the middle of Southeast DC, in our parking lot, and I could not get myself together.
Have you ever experienced a time when you were falling apart on the inside, yet showed everyone around you the total opposite? Do you know anyone who spends so much time living up to the expectations of others that they simply don't know what they need or want? Hi, I'm Dr. Denise Rollins, Executive Director of the Whole Heart Grief and Life Resource Center, where we help people address their pain, tap into their power, and pursue their purpose. Today, my guest, Sabrina Davis, will talk to us about a time when she was broken. Once she's done that, I will walk her through one of the Whole Heart exercises called Meet My Mask. The Meet My Mask exercise was designed to help people understand what they show and hide from the world and why. This is absolutely an exercise that you can also do on your own. As you listen to Sabrina share her story, look for any parallels in your own life. Then complete the exercise yourself. Enjoy. All right. I am Denise Rollins, Executive Director of the Whole Heart Grief and Life Resource Center, and I have the pleasure of talking to Sabrina Davis. This series is all about talking with amazing people who have also had bumps on their journey, and I want to hear about the process. So, Sabrina, for you, I really want to hear about a low time for you and maybe what came out of it, the decisions you made. I just want to hear about a time of brokenness.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was a career educator. And that's how I always will identify myself, as being a career educator. And that was about this summer, back to a summer ago. So almost now 7, 8 months ago. I found myself going back for my 11th year, in education. And I had known for a little bit that it's like, if you ever had those seasons where you like know it's getting ready to be hard. It was like a lot of things leading up to the moment. And it was like a school year where we had so much transition. And I had a new leader, and there were so many things happening just like in my life at the time as well. I was going through a lot of like personal things. And I just felt this like immense like drain. And when I got to school, I've always been the educator who had really strong relationships with students. I was always, had a really great relationship with the team that I coached, because I was a leader and an administrator within the school. And I remember having a couple of instances at school that were happening back to back to back. And I've always worked with Black and Brown children. 100% of my students were Black. And there was this moment where I found myself like in a class change, and kids were literally horseplaying, and I flipped onto students. And coming down out of the moment, kids and teachers and janitor folks, everybody that was in the hallway that heard this interaction was so taken aback, because that was just not who I was. It's not the kind of educator that I was. I'm talking about, I yelled and I berated and I like really caused damage with children because they were play fighting and doing what kids do, what high school kids do. And I remember that situation happened, and I felt this like immense grief going home. And again, like driving, super tired. And then the next day going back to school and having to jump into a huge fight at school. To know, like, in school fight, like high school kids have fights, right? And it happened, and I think that was like compounded all the things that I was going through, and found myself in the midst of this fight, and like me breaking up 6 foot boys and like yelling and having to be there. And I found myself like got in my car at the end of the day. School lets out at 4. We have an extended school day. So again, thinking about time, right? We had an extended school day, and I found myself sitting in the parking lot in full-blown panic attack. In the middle of Southeast DC, in our parking lot, and I could not get myself together. And I remember calling my parents, and I said, I cannot do this. I am not showing up how I know I show up as my best self as an educator. That day of that fight, I had planned to go to school that day and have a restorative conversation with those students because I had caused damage and trauma and harm to them. But because of this huge brawl, like the entire school had gone on lockdown. And I found myself like, I've got to repair harm. There's these fights breaking out. I'm not serving students the way that I know that I can. I'm not being a good example to teachers the way that I know that I can be. I think it was also coupled with like I had like a really hard medical thing that summer that I was trying to deal with, but I told myself because I was a career woman that like I needed to get past that and not heal from that. And so my parents, like just over the phone, as calmly as they are, were just like, "We don't have to go back tomorrow." And it gave me this like sense of immense freedom that I like had never felt before because I felt so when you're in education and it is so hard to step away from students mid, right? In the middle of a year, in the middle of a something, in the middle of a, because you always are like, no, I want to finish this out. I don't want to ever. And so my whole drive home, I just couldn't, only thing I could think about was going to sleep and like resting and like letting my body rest because I just like, I wasn't getting that rejuvenation at night of going to sleep. I've always been a nap kid. And I just wasn't getting that in the space. And I knew that I wasn't talking to anybody about what I was going through. I didn't have any outlet to release. It was constant. It was every day. On the weekends, I found myself completely gutted and like trying to be in the dark by myself the entire weekend because I was trying to rejuvenate. And so it was an extremely low place. And I just, and I think I'm only like, what is this, month 8 now of this journey, but I just didn't know how important rest was. I was going nonstop. The clarity that I have now to be able to look back because I'm rested is so, I just don't think people understand how much rest means to the mind and the body. Like it's a physical thing, but it is so much a spiritual thing and like how your interactions with people and how that impacts everything that you do. So yeah, I found myself at that very low point and I that night when I got home, I emailed my principal and told her that, I needed to take a mental health day. It was it was like a Thursday night for that Friday. Um, and then by Sunday morning, I sent my letter of resignation because just that little bit of rest from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I had this clarity that I was going to put somebody in danger or I was going to put myself in danger. I wasn't going to be thinking clearly in the next situation that I knew that I needed for myself to stop and pause and like lean into a time of rest. And I think it took me like a whole month to just like allow myself to rest because I was in this like really hard space. Like you've always identified as an educator, you always have been identified by your career. You're being lazy if you're just resting. So it took me a while to get there, but it was definitely a necessary moment that I've had so far in my journey.
That's amazing. Sabrina, I want to freeze the period of time before you took your mental health day, before you said, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
Let's say in those weeks or months, one of the activities we do at Wholeheart is we call it the mask exercise. And we talk a little bit about the mask that we wear. If you think about that couple months before you decided to take care of you, one of the things we ask people is on the front of your mask, what is it that you show people? What is it that they see? And so what were you really intentional about them seeing about you before you had this epiphany?
I was trying to radiate joy. I was trying to be as joy. It was like this almost like toxic positivity, right? Like I wanted people to see that I had it all together, that it didn't matter how many things that you put on my plate, that I had it together. Um, but I would definitely say like the biggest thing for me was just like I was like because I'm a spiritual woman, I believe in who God is. I'm like, oh well, this is what I've been dealt. like this is a season that I've been dealt. And like, in order for me to be strong, in order for me to like be the soldier in this, I need to take it on and I need to be this strong person and I need to be positive all the time. Even though things were hard, I needed to deal with them by myself. So I would definitely say strength was one of those things I put on my mask. Positivity was one of those things, and just joy. I would whatever before that bell rang and students came in, I would muster up whatever I had to muster up to just greet my team and kids with joy every day. And I think that's because I didn't want anybody to know where I was. I didn't want, because as a leader in education, you don't want people to, it's already hard enough job. And as a leader, I didn't want people to see me down because I knew with the work that they were doing in front of kids in classrooms every day was tough too. So, yeah.
So if you think about you were trying to radiate joy and strength and all this other stuff, this was on the front of your mask. But oftentimes a mask hides something. Yeah. So what was behind your mask? The stuff that people couldn't see and you definitely didn't tell people. What were you hiding from the world?
Hurt, anger, just tiredness, right? This really big sense of feeling as if the problem was unsolvable. That it wasn't, that I didn't, there was no hope in the place where I was. I was like, this is what it is. This is what I've been dealt, and I have to do it. And there's nothing that's going to change it. It was definitely a place that was. There was the other side of my mask would be there's hope nowhere. I couldn't find it anywhere.
Wow. And that contradiction is heavy. So no wonder you were carrying heaviness when you made this decision. So I'm interested. So you make this decision, I'm going to take care of myself. You make that, and then immediately now you're not in the school system. But I'm curious, right after you made that decision, did you wear a mask then? Like, was there anything that you were intentional about showing and hiding as you walked away from what wasn't nurturing to your soul?
Yeah, because I think I didn't even tell people why. There are coworkers who I was like super, super close to. And I think it's even still now, because I was wearing this joy and positivity, people still today are upset about the decision I made because they're like, Sabrina, you were fine. Like, and immediately I felt that, right? And I just didn't tell people why I left. And I just told people I'm in transition, like, and I just left it. I didn't give any details. I had when I sent the letter of resignation, I said I would come back to work in a couple of days, but because it was like a safety thing, right? Where I was like feeling like unsafe in my school environment, and I was feeling so mentally drained. I didn't think I would be able to like keep my staff and students physically safe. They told me not to return to the school building. So that shut me down even worse. So I never got a chance to like say goodbye to my people in the way that I wanted to say goodbye. And so those first couple of weeks, I was like, I can't even have real conversations about what is going on with me. I was afraid to share because there are people who are going through the exact same thing I am. And I know because they've shared, but because I'm a leader, I'm afraid to share because then this is going to unearth, right? And expose this huge thing that is happening, right? And so if I leave, is there going to be a mass exodus? So I was carrying around this hold that I was the owner of. I was afraid to say anything, and I felt like I would be the reason that students wouldn't have or teachers wouldn't have. And so I just hid the reason of why I left in the first place. So I'd carried that around for a long time.
Wow.
I really, really.
So now you're 7 or 8 months in. Tell me how you are different now than back then.
Light years different, but I thank God for that, who I was then, because I couldn't be who I am now if I hadn't gone through that. I am free of what everybody else thinks. I mean, there's always going to be that thing in the back of your mind that you're going to like think that, but that used to be the first thing that I thought about in making every single decision. And when I make decisions now, it's like, what is true to Sabrina? Like, also, like, who am I? Now, there's this like quote, and it's like, who were you before the world told you who you were? Right. So, before I was an educator, before I was the daughter of a pastor, before I was the daughter of educators, right? I'm the daughter of like before I was all of those things, like, who is Sabrina? Outside of this construct of what society has said that I am. And I think I'm a leader. Like, I know I'm a leader. And sometimes when you're a leader, that it calls you to be most vulnerable in places where people might be afraid to. And it calls for you to take care of yourself first, because you cannot pour from absence. Like, you cannot pour if there is nothing to give. And so I've learned that I cannot be a leader if I'm empty. I can't. I cannot be a help to anyone if I don't have anything to give myself. And so yeah, I'm different. I respond differently now. I also just, it's so interesting the clarity and the focus that you can have when you have rest and when you have had rest. And I think that that has been, this clarity on this side is so, even just like, and like now me deciding like, oh, I kind of want to enter the job force now, right? The clarity that I have about like, I used to be like, oh, pick me, pick me, pick me. And I'm like, thank you so much. This actually doesn't align, you know? Or walking into job interviews with this idea that, you know, even being able to say like, what do you need from a boss, or what do you need? When they ask that question, I'm like, well, I've been on sabbatical and here are some things that I need in my next role. And feeling that type of confidence to share with an employer. So yeah, I would say I'm definitely different on this side of it.
So one of the things that just strikes me is your identity in many ways was wrapped up in your job title, was wrapped up in what others, people, including society, thought of you, even wrapped up in what your role was as a person who was spiritual in nature. So people wear masks. Sometimes it is, I am struggling with all of those identities. And then because sometimes we're struggling, the struggle is within us because we expect ourselves to be perfect and superheroes. So I want you to tell me, what would you say to that person who's worn that mask all this time, who is feeling like the load is so heavy and nobody gets it? Like, what would have spoken life into you 7, 8 months ago that you could possibly impart to someone else?
I wish that I could have said, how I serve others is also the way that others can serve me, or that like, there's this moment where we give advice to others, right? And so I think I had this step back moment where my therapist said, what's the advice that you would give your best friend if she was going through this situation? Do that. Because a lot of times we don't extend grace to ourselves, but the people who are close to us, we would extend that grace to them. And so I just charge anybody that's in the situation of going through, step out of it, put somebody else that you love in it, and what would you tell them to do? And then follow those steps yourself, because unfortunately, because a lot of people who are introspective, a lot of people who are introverts, and I can show as I'm an extrovert, but a lot of people, we don't extend the same grace to ourselves that we do others. And so again, I would say step out of your situation, put a whole placeholder in there and give them the advice. Write yourself a letter and don't write it to yourself, write it to your best friend and then turn around and give that advice to yourself. That's truly what I would tell them to do.
And see, you said a lot about rest. And I think it's something that many of us don't learn to cherish until we get pushed to a point where we have to do that. But that's an act of self-care. And I believe self-care leads to self-love. And that's exactly what you just said. Like this, speaking to myself lovingly, because a lot of times the person who beats us down the worst is us. And so it sounds like you're learning to care for and love yourself so that you can love others even more.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been a self-love journey. It definitely has.
I like it. I appreciate you telling your story because I think people will learn from it. And it's three.
I hope you found Sabrina's interview as insightful as I did. She made such great points, but the two that stand out to me is figuring out who you are before the world told you who you are. That's all about identity. And then the second point that she made about the importance of rest. How many of us take advantage of rest and put ourselves first? If you're interested in doing this activity yourself, please follow the link at the end of this video. And stay tuned for other conversations with people where we'll walk through whole heart exercises.